you have to pay to put out private fires, okay? But we said we can't have houses that are on fire, so you have to put out the houses that are on fire even if they're not paid. Well, then everyone who's surrounding you is basically paying the cost of you.
Negative extra costs.
Yeah, you're basically insuring your house and the house next to you, and that drives the price up, and it prices more people out, and you have ever increasing pool of uninsured people, and you have an ever increasing pool of uninsured people, and a smaller and smaller pool of insured who are subsidizing it for all of them. So you need a plan that covers everybody, and I'm not saying it has to be. I'm not saying it has to be a universal plan like in Europe, but every other industrialized country has it. But you have to have something to cover everybody. And this plan was the most conservative plan out there. It was a plan. I believe it was a plan that was even proposed by Dole back in the 90s. I'm not 100% on that, but it came out of the American Heritage Foundation.
That's why they use it.
And if Mitt Romney has a plan to do it, explain your plan. I mean,
I think if Mitt Romney, there's a fallacy again about Mitt Romney that he's a bad guy. I would go on record as saying that in my lifetime, presidential elections, I believe I started watching in 2000. I was the only one in 8th grade who knew what they were talking about. I believe Mitt Romney is probably the best human being we've thrown out there. He's not a great politician. He's not. I think he was a good governor in Massachusetts, but he's the best human being we've thrown out there. And people in the media have vilified him because he has money, because he made a lot of money at Bain Capital. When there are countless amount of stories where it's Christmas and a neighbor had an issue and Mitt Romney was there with his 5 children with a stereo and money for the bill and giving through the Mormon church. And a lot of that Mormon church is giving.
Well, charity is nice, but
very nice.
There are precedent. There are stories like that, but there's also a story of when he went to a homeless veteran shelter years ago, and they were running low on milk, and he said in his attempt to make a joke, well, maybe we could teach these homeless vets how to milk cows.
Do you know what happened 2 weeks later?
And he donated the milk.
Thank you.
But that was just because of the
2 weeks
after.
So what you're telling me is when he went there, he was a little awkward with his wording of it, and 2 weeks later he donated a check for the whole bill for the milk.
Yeah,
so what's the problem?
Because first of all, we don't know if he would have donated it if it hadn't been for the political outrage.
We don't know if he would have.
But
all this phony political outrage on both sides of the aisle is terrible. We look for politicians to be these infallible individuals.
And they're not.
And they're human beings. There are people that laugh, there are people that joke, they curse occasionally, there are people that, have extramarital affairs. It doesn't make them terrible human beings.
There are people that drink obsessively like the vice president.
I don't think Romney is a horrible human being. But I do think
he's been deemed one.
But I do think you don't, when you come from that type of lifestyle, when you're born wealthy, and okay, he did give his money he did give his inheritance to charity, fine, but he got a world-class education.
But I don't understand whether you're vilifying him for something that...
I'm not vilifying him.
But there's almost like a vilifying. It's like Barack Obama grew up poor. Barack Obama was not rich.
Well, what's more of a story of America? You're born where Obama was and where he got to now, or
which was Hawaii, by the way. You're born
from a wealthy executive governor, and you become a wealthy executive governor. Who embodies more of the American dream? I mean, big surprise. You're a wealthy governor, former business executive. Your father was a wealthy business executive. You haven't moved up.
That's exactly what he's trying to do.
I don't understand where
That's exactly what he's trying to do right now. He's trying to move forward.
I don't know what you...
And I don't say he's stationary.
But I don't know what you want the man to do. Do you want the man to... I don't know, maybe when he's in the womb, say, could you please lose your job for the next 2 weeks? For my political career, it would be nicer if you were working at McDonald's. Well, you don't choose who you're born to. You don't choose the life you don't choose who you're born to. But what you choose to do with your life is the story at hand.
There are plenty of people that are born into money and become lowlifes.
Well, I mean, look, we have you have Theodore Roosevelt, you have Franklin Delano Roosevelt. These were people that were born wealthy. But they're widely called traitors of their class because they supported policies. They recognize the value in saying, look, not everybody is as lucky as I am. And the problem I have too with when we see Ryan when he accepted the vice presidential bid, he said we don't guarantee equal outcomes but equal opportunities. But that's on the flawed assumption that everybody starts out at the same level. How is somebody
But it's not. But it's not. How is the government supposed to make sure that everyone starts out on the same level?
Well,
if you're a parent and you want to pay for a better education for your children, I was lucky enough for my parents, who we are by no means, top 1% rich, and I was lucky enough. My parents worked hard enough to send me to Christ the King, as opposed to a John Adams or Franklin K. Lane school, because they recognize the value of an education. Who are we to tell those parents, you know what, don't send me, go to Lane, you're rich, go to Franklin K. Lane, don't go to Christ.
Why aren't we spending money to make Franklin K. Lane and Grove Cleveland and all those other high schools? Why aren't we investing in improving those schools? You're never going to have you're never going to have entirely equal opportunities, but you have to at least try to make the investments. I mean, we see inequality in this country now, which nobody is talking about.
Which has increased in 4 years.
But it's been a 20-year trend.
It's increasing.
So you need to make investments that help to guarantee that there are equal opportunities, and that doesn't rest in giving, tax cuts that disproportionately affect the wealthy.
Another fallacy that I believe of liberalism is the fact that taxes are not government property. Now, Elizabeth Warren said, and the line, which I completely believe was taken out of context, but it's just a part of politics, was the "you didn't build that" line. And Elizabeth Warren said, "You did not build that," a couple weeks later in a diner in Boston, I believe. And there is this feeling that, like I said with the Chicago Center, I don't remember who it was, I'm pretty sure he's the one that lost 4 years ago, but that taxes are government money, and that this redistribution of wealth of hedge fund managers and rich people, that 88% of the federal budget is paid by the top 1%. So if I have to hear one more time about tax fairness and paying your fair share, and they don't pay enough, and Ed Schultz going off on paying your fair share, and this, that, and the third, 89% is paid by the top 1%.
You want to talk about the American dream of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps? If you level the playing field across the board and tell everybody that if you do make it to the top 1%, you have to give half of that back, or you have to give 45% of that back. Why bother?
Well,
I'm reminded of a story.
I don't think that asking an additional 3% in terms of, and then another thing that they always talk about when you hear it, they say equal opportunities and everything, but they also say shared sacrifice. How exactly are the wealthy sharing in the sacrifice of this economic recession? We're seeing budget cuts to every program that benefits the poor just at a time when we have more people that need it. We haven't seen a single tax increase on the wealthy. We haven't seen, we're seeing programs undermined. Where's the shared sacrifice? There's no shared sacrifice.
Previously stated, these programs aren't rights. These programs aren't guaranteed in the Declaration of Independence. I once sat in a class at Queens College.
Low tax rate.
Well, as previously stated, taxes are people's money. When you get taxed, that's your money. You get paid on a Friday or a Thursday or whatever day, and you have this amount of money, and then the government says, we're going to take this, and then when we can't fit our budget, we're going to take a little bit more.
But we have to invest in the technology. How are we going to invest in infrastructure? How are we going to look around? We look around at the rest of the world. They're doing these things. They have higher taxes, yes. They don't
have as large an economy as we do.
Well, but collectively, the EU. It's not in a good condition now because of various things. But
they should never be quoted the EU.
They have higher tax rates, but they're investing in the infrastructure that's going to develop the next businesses. When the idea,
Listen,
you didn't build it.
if you want to talk about what I just said, which is things that the government gives to low-income people aren't rights, we also could look at Europe and see that 3,000 Spanish police officers were protesting yesterday. Do you know why they were protesting?
Set budget cuts.
No, they took away their Christmas bonuses. That's why they were protesting. Because once you give someone something, once the government gives you a Christmas bonus,
They've taken a lot away from the unions in this country over the last years, private and public unions, and we have. I'm wondering if that's
union execs make good money.
Like Mayor Bloomberg.
Union executives need to look at their union workers, which Republicans have no problem with, need to look at their union executives and say, why are you making so much money?
Well, when we see people complaining about the public sector unions and how much money they're taking and all of that, why is the question always, why do they have that? That's not, you're talking about envy, how, people envy the wealthy. Why is it that the public is saying that? Well, why do they have those public benefits? Why do they have generous pension benefits?
Because it's a bubble, and when it bursts, 2008 is going to be like a happy time.
Why aren't they asking, how come I don't have that, which I used to in this country before? We had company private pensions, we had private, the unionization rate has dropped in this country, quite far since the 70s. I mean, why is that the question? But,
Well, let's say teachers, for instance, just using that as an example. Are you asking why are private educators wondering why they're not having a pension?
No, just people in general. The unionization rate used to be high in this country, mainly because we had manufacturing, we had more manufacturing.
A very good reason why.
But, we don't see this, years ago in the 50s and 60s, unionization was considered, it was the norm. And we've seen that undermining over the years, that, we've seen the rates of private unions, membership going down. We don't see the same rate of unionization in the services sector.
The UAW is one of the things that killed the car industry, I feel.
Well, it was also the fact that, it was to the company's benefit to include health benefits, because then they didn't have to include it in their current expenses. They could put it off in the future. So they did that because it made their bottom line a little better. Wasn't the union demanding it? Yes, but it was also the fact that these corporate leaders wanted it to look good for their term as CEO.
Yes, they want their numbers to go up for the quarterly, because I think that people have a problem with unions because, number one, it's impossible to fire people sometimes, and workers are not held accountable.
Well, they're held accountable. I mean, it depends.
And this is a bad example. Well, let's just look at baseball. Let's look at the guy on the Brewers whose name is escaping me right now, who tested positive for steroids last year. And you know how many games he was suspended?
No.
Thank you. They lost the test. There's no way to...
Isn't that, instead of breaking the unions,
Ryan Braun, by the way.
Conservatives sometimes want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Is everything perfect? No. I mean, there are teachers even that have tenure.
There are teachers that have tenure. I mean, we went to Queens College, and I'm sure we had a few that...
Well, academic tenure is different. I'm talking about,
There are teachers that have tenure that don't help children. And once they're in, you can't get rid of them. And I think that's the problem people have with unions. That once you reach a certain point, sanitation as well, there's no...
But another thing I want to bring up is because you say, we give out these public benefits and they're not rights, and people get used to them. But the problem I feel that conservatives often have too is they don't realize that affects you. It's easy to say, if we don't provide health insurance to, if we cut Medicaid $820 billion, which is what the Ryan plan called for, and what Romney seems to have adopted as well, that's not going to affect us. But it does.
Put politely, Paul Ryan's plans don't really mean anything. Paul Ryan will be the president pro tem of the Senate as vice president. He will work out in his little red hat for Time magazine, and that is it. He did his job. He I believe he lost.